I'd like to start by thanking our hosts here at USC, and especially all of the efforts of Professor Soul, who's worked tirelessly these past 3 months or so to bring us all here today. And I'd like to thank you all for making the effort to come all the way out to Los Angeles to be with us. Let's see. Okay, so what I'm going to show you today is the Greece government working draft balance sheet that Paul showed briefly yesterday. So here you see our working draft Greece government balance sheet. If you've ever looked at a complete statement of financial position, you can see that this is a simplified model. So why is this significant? As an investor in both government securities as well as the private sector, and especially in distressed situations such as Greece, we view the Greece government balance sheet as the essential starting point on the path to prosperity. Now, ideally, we'd have a full set of accrual-based financial statements produced according to international accounting standards and independently audited. But we don't, so we need a starting point to begin building trust and confidence with transparency and accountability for a wide range of stakeholders, whether it's the official sector, whether it's the investors, politicians, probably most importantly your citizens who are voting and paying taxes, hopefully. So the goal here is to understand where net worth stands today and then to be able to see how it changes going forward. So let's see. So you can see here sort of the essential elements of a balance sheet. And I'll walk you through the numbers and then give some additional details and points of comparison. So you'll see on the right, well, GDP is obviously not, part of your financial statements. We put the GDP in percentages here to allow for comparability with other countries and to give a sense of scale of the numbers. So at the top, we start with financial assets of 52 billion euros, which is about 30% of GDP. Then you have non-financial assets of 90 billion euros. That's an estimate, about 51% of GDP. That adds to 142 in total assets, 81% of GDP. Next, you have financial liabilities, or debt, easier way to say it, of 118, which, obviously you'll notice is a big difference from the headline numbers that the media constantly repeats. We'll get into that in more detail in a minute. And you have an estimate of non-financial liabilities, 255 billion, 145% of GDP, and total liabilities of 373. That gives you a net worth of a negative 231 billion, or negative 131% of GDP. Now, great, but clearly what you can see here is that the debt is not the issue. So now we'll quickly walk through how, where these numbers came from and compare them to some benchmarks. So you've seen this chart yesterday. You've got a range of net worths from a positive 38% all the way down to a negative 158% of GDP. If you remember, Greece came in at a negative 131%, so it was right in line with double or triple A rated France. So not crazy. Here we have 3 more countries, which the IMF happens to have published simplified balance sheets for in their FTEs. Thank you, Marco. And as you can see here, Greece at a negative 131% is pretty in line with Portugal. Next, we have financial assets. These numbers are published by the Eurostat, the ECB, used by the IMF with great detail. They give you all the categories. I showed starting in 2012, around the time of the PSI OSI, and you can see the progression through 2015. Obviously not great performance, but we have really good detail. So that's a good number for the balance sheet. And note that this is the measure of financial assets, which you would subtract from your financial liabilities to get your measure of net debt, which is very important. So now non-financial assets. Greece doesn't publish this measure, so we have to estimate. We have a few examples here from the IMF FTEs. And for Greece, we assumed approximately half of the average of peers Portugal and Ireland, the EU peers. And this estimate's based on cap rates that are about twice these other countries, and financial assets that have basically been, as you saw on the last page, that have been halved over the past few years, while these peers have basically remained stable or even increased. Now, financial liabilities. In 2014, KPMG produced a 53-page expert's opinion which valued Greece government debt using the international accounting standards. We simply updated the number through year-end 2015 based on the maturities and new borrowings and accretion according to the international rules, IPSIS and IFRS. Now, to give you a better sense of how these rules work, we have some highlights from the IPSIS Standard 29 and IFRS 39. If you're familiar at all with IFRS and public company financial statements, there are basically no material differences. It's the same, basically the same system. So it's been used for years. You'll see both new debt and substantially modified debt are put on the books at fair value based on market comparable prices and yields on the date of the transaction and accrete to par over the life of the debt instrument. These are international rules that have been developed by a wide range of stakeholders in an open process over many years and are required to receive a clean audit opinion. These are the rules. We didn't make these things up. There's a great system that people have worked very hard for years to develop. And importantly, you do not arbitrarily apply a random discount rate, and you do not mark to market over the life of the debt instrument. These are the rules. They're simple, and they make a lot of sense when you learn them. Non-financial liabilities. These include things like pensions, payables, and other provisions. Now, pensions we had to extrapolate. We did so based on two methodologies in order to test the number, and both as a multiple of benchmarks and a comparison to Portugal. I'll show you more details of this in a minute. Payables, those come directly from Eurostat data. That's a published tested number. And other liabilities we estimate to be at about 10% of GDP based on a limited sample of available benchmarks that we do have. So pensions. There are a few countries that publish financial statements and provide reasonable disclosure on their pensions, including their balance sheet pension liability, the number on their balance sheet for pensions, or annual government employee pension. Greece happens to publish their government employee pension payments of about $6 billion. So what we did to extrapolate the Greece pension number, we applied the EU average, which is about 35 times. You see the 33 and the 36, it's, rounding, to the Greece payments, and we get our $222 billion, which when we then compare, which gives you 126%, and when we compare it to Portugal at 134th, the number makes sense. Now, so that's the opening balance sheet. To further illustrate the importance of valuing your financial liabilities under the international accounting standards, we'll take a quick look at the recent third program from the ESM and the actual payments and debt relief they received in 2015. In 2015, Greece received disbursements of about $21.4 billion. Now, under international accounting rules, due to the highly concessionary highly concessionary, below market rates of interest, less than 1%, very long maturities. The balance sheet value or fair value of that debt is only $4.4 billion. That's applying IPSIS or IFRS to these disbursements, which gives you the difference of $17 billion is debt relief. Just like everyone talks about the debt relief they may receive in the future by extending maturities or reducing the interest rate, it is the same calculation. They're already receiving debt relief through these concessionary loans, which they received in 2015, and they have a program out to 2018 to receive more funding. Every time that funding comes in, there is debt relief built into those numbers. This just shows our model in a bit more detail. To scoot along, we'll go through them just very quickly. We modeled the whole 3-year program. In fact, we modeled it out to 2025, based on ESM statements about what they think the future disbursements over the course of the program will be, Greece's projected debt service, and we assumed year-end 2015 market conditions. So if you look at row 4 real quick, that shows you your balance sheet net debt impact, which is the reduction in balance sheet value of net debt from the ESM disbursements under the current program. This is basically your cumulative increase in net worth from the debt relief that you received. So in other words, this is what happens when you replace near maturity, high interest rate debt with these very long loans at very concessionary rates. Your net worth actually increases. Let's see, I have 1 minute left, so the next couple of slides just show it in more detail. I'll skip to my conclusions. So to conclude, for investors, a balance sheet is the first step on the path to prosperity and is essential to build trust and confidence with transparency and accountability. This basically allows the world to see your government net debt and to track the annual changes in net worth. You just have to follow the rules. In 2015, Greece received significant debt relief and will continue to do so under the generous third program. So kind of bringing these points together, you can see that Greece has some great tools available to begin rebuilding, to jumpstart economic growth, create jobs, reduce both government and private sector yields. Thank you.